It's a very special MacBreak Weekly, the day after Christmas, and it's our year-end best of some of the highlights of 2023. Let's sit back, enjoy an eggnog, and, well, you don't have to enjoy an eggnog, and watch the best of MacBreak Weekly. Happy holidays.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is MacBreak Weekly, episode 901 for Tuesday, December 26th, 2023, our best of the year. Happy holidays, everybody. Look, we've got chestnuts roasting by all the open fires. Well, thank you for the Yuletide greetings, Anthony Nielsen, who is producing our very special episode today. This is the best of 2023. You know, we do this every year. I always look forward to it. We also get a chance to give Alex Lindsay and Andy Anako and Jason Snell some time off to spend with their family. Hope you're having a great day after Christmas. This is Boxing Day, isn't it? Hope you're not having to box up some of the things you got last on Christmas or on Hanukkah. We did have a gift from Apple early in the year, brand new M2 chips and MacBook Pros. Watch.
Yes.
So weirdly, yesterday, Mark Gurman unexpectedly said, "Oh yeah, there's gonna be new Macs tomorrow."
Yeah, just like, yeah.
What?
Before MacBreak or after MacBreak? That's all we want to know.
Not to tell tales out of school, but you know, when you know they're coming, you want it to be a surprise. And we got all the way till yesterday, and I'm like, oh, come on. Come on.
Yeah, because we're all children, and Apple treats us like children on Christmas morning, when actually we'd much rather be able to sort of plan ahead before, like, we commit our department to making lots of purchases we're going to have to regret later on.
I mean, say whatever. When you're under embargo, it's really nice.
Oh, you knew. You knew. So he broke his embargo? Do you think that's what he did?
No. He talked to somebody. I saw a couple reports. Mac Rumors, I think, had a report too, and I'm like, all right, well, somebody talked.
Can you make a deal like Mark Gurman says to Mac Rumors? I'll tell you what I know if you tell me what you know, but don't quote me. And even though they're both breaking embargo, they're not breaking their own embargo in their own publication.
But Apple doesn't tell this to Mac Rumors or Mark Gurman, right? Somebody else who
well, they told you.
Heads up. Yeah. I knew something was coming. I didn't know what, although based on all of Mark Gurman's reports, it was pretty obvious what it was going to be, right?
So what, tell me just at it, because I'm of course not in this gravy train pipeline of journalists. What, how did it occur? Did somebody call you? Do you get an email?
Yeah, I got a heads up that there's news dropping. Yeah, and that was it. And literally,
was it
that's
like
all.
A guy in a parking garage in a trench coat?
Not even time, right? So it's like set your alarm for 6 a.m. because it's always at 6 a.m. and it'll probably be those things because of all the reporting from Bloomberg and Mark Gurman.
But all you were told is sometime tomorrow, Tuesday?
Yeah, it was Monday.
Today, so yesterday they said
Tuesday. Sorry, Tuesday. Yes, today. What day is it today? Yes,
today's Tuesday. So they
and
told
then everything
you
else is guessing.
Something? Yeah.
So I you know, it's just one of those things that the best moment, one of the most fun, and I get Andy's point, like it is a PR timed thing, and if people can report it, they should report it. But I had a delightful moment many years ago when Mountain Lion came out, where we got a bunch of media were summoned individually to briefings, not knowing what it was about. And I was in there, and MG Sigler, who was at the time at TechCrunch, was in there.
Yes, good old MG.
And we got our briefings for Mountain Lion, and I don't know if you remember, but there were literally no reports that there was going to be a new Mac OS update. None, zero. And then you walk into the room, and they're like, we have a new Mac OS update. And you're like, what? And then I walk out, and MG is there because he's been on the phone or something, and we're walking to our cars, and we look at each other, and they're like, were you totally surprised by that? And it was like, yes. And it was kind of fun because it was not that, you know, the people who do work like Mark Gurman to get the stuff up in advance, I'm not really a believer in that it's spoilers and that it ruins the fun, but it is fun every now and then for a legitimate surprise to happen. And Apple scrutiny is so great at this point that it basically never happens.
Well, given what we said last week and my upset over it, that Apple wasn't going to do much this year, and don't get excited for new Macs because they've taken people off the Mac team and putting them on the VR team and blah, blah, blah. I had geared myself up for, just sadness through at least June. and we even, there was no mention. Remember last week? Do you remember last week when we thought there wasn't even going to be a new Mac Mini this year? We knew there'd be those. Well, they'll do.
I didn't.
You didn't think, you never for a moment believed that?
No,
I thought it.
The Mac Mini was obvious because it was the only member of the product line that was still in the, hey, here's the really, really first swing proof of concept Apple Silicon in there. It needed to receive new Apple Silicon.
Literally 1 week ago, there were stories saying MacBook Pro refresh delayed again.
Yeah. How about that?
Gurman himself said, well, all we're going to really see is a 15-inch M2 MacBook Air.
Well, that's not true. Gurman said that these products were coming. And in fact, he reported last November that they had been delayed from a November release. Remember, Apple said we're done for the year. And so then it was like, okay, I guess those aren't coming. And then what Gurman said after that, which I thought was funny, is he tried to extrapolate. And he said, well, they probably won't do any product releases in January. They don't do that. They'll probably do a March event. Yeah. And I thought to myself, I don't know. These are products that, in fact, I'm on the record. There's a podcast where I say it. It's like, just because there's no event in January doesn't mean they can't do a press release and a video release.
They used to announce stuff in January. Remember, these two products
clearly were on the verge of being released in November, and then they pulled back.
Yeah.
So obviously they're primed. They're in the chamber. They're ready to go. And here they are.
So these were the MacBooks and the Mac Mini. By the way, I know we're completely bearing the lead. New Mac Mini, new MacBook Pro 14-inch, new MacBook Pro 16-inch. Did I miss anything? Yeah. Those are the three new things. That's it. And those are clearly delayed by the COVID-0 policy that had shut down those factories. They make these at Quanta. Where do they make these? Do we know?
I don't know. They did have a bunch of escalating delays over time, right? That led to the M2 Air being delayed. And it feels like everything just kind of got pushed back. It's also possible, though, that they just decided while they were working on their November product releases, they're like, why are we pushing this out? Let's wait till January. We'll have more of them in stock. We have other products to plug. These aren't really stocking stuffers, right? Get your friend a 16-inch MacBook Pro under the tree. We could probably survive holding them until January, but they clearly that was the issue, is they thought this was going to be an end 22 thing, and it ended up being.
They'd like to too, for the buyers to be able to buy them for Christmas and the holidays, right? January is not. I can't imagine January is because you've got budgets you've got to spend. January's kind of the worst time to release something, I would think.
Do we know what the return policy is? Because I know there's a bunch of people in office hours that had just bought Mac Minis, of course, at the end of the year. Like, well, they're not going to make any for a while. I might as well.
You get a grace period. I don't know how long it is, though.
Yeah, I think it's like 30 days. And so if you have one out there, you might want to check with your Apple store.
Take it back.
Take it back, get the new one. Because the other thing is the price dropped. So not only did they they dropped from $699 to $599 for the base unit, which is a very powerful computer.
Yeah.
So it's very, very powerful.
Is that M2 or M1 based?
That's the M2.
It's M2.
M2, wow. 8 gig. You now can, if you work hard at it, can spend $4,500 on a Mac Mini. I did look this morning. I was like, if I just max everything out,
that's why the Mac Mini is one of the most important Macs in the entire lineup, everything included, because it is the, I don't have a lot of money, but I want a Mac. It's the $500.99 solution. It is also the, I want a workstation, but I want several workstations for all of my office, or I want a workstation, but I don't need to have my brain hammered to death by more cores than I absolutely need. I don't need the tower configuration replaceable drives. I mean, I can't think of any. If Apple were to cancel the Mac Mini, I don't believe that they're going to do that. But if that were to happen, I would know that, my goodness, some huge fault in philosophy has just changed inside of Apple, because it solves so many problems for Apple and its customers.
It's like a pressure release valve. It basically is if we don't make a Mac that fits you, we make this and it fits everybody else, right? And I don't know, I'm getting a vibe too, given there's a lot of comparisons that are like the 27-inch, the studio display, and the Mac Mini, and they talk a lot about that, like compared to an old iMac. And I thought, I'm starting to believe those reports that the big iMac isn't coming back, because between a studio display or some other 27-inch display and this new Mac Mini,
it's a lot of computer.
I mean, does that not fill the need, or the Mac Studio fill the need that maybe that bigger iMac fulfilled? I don't know.
And I'm also curious how many monitors the Pro supports. So the Pro has more Thunderbolts. I believe it's now 4 Thunderbolts.
They did not.
Pro.
Oh, the Pro Mac Mini. Let's get this clear.
Mac
It's
Mini.
the
So
same-
there's an
yeah.
M2, 8 core and 10 core, 8 gigs of RAM. And then there's the M2 Pro, 10 core CPU, 16 core GPU, and starting point is 16 gigs. So you're saying, and 4, not 1, not 2, but 3, not 4, but 3, not 3, but 4 Thunderbolt 4 ports.
A lot of us pay attention to that because, we like with my Mac Studio, it's full. Like all the ports are.
You also get an
I have to
HDMI
break stuff
port,
out.
gigabit Ethernet, and a headphone jack, and 2 USB-A ports. So this is really like a short stack Mac Studio, is what this
and
really
it's
is.
Alex. It's three displays,
3 displays
on the Pro model.
On the
Also,
Pro.
we're kind of backing into this story, but one of the big parts of this new Mac Mini story is it is literally the first Apple Silicon at the Pro tier on the desktop. You've had the base model M1 and M2. You've had the super fast Max and Ultra on the Mac Studio, but what you haven't had is that one in the middle, the Pro, that gives you a little bit more core, more GPU, more RAM, more displays. And that higher end Mac Mini model is going to give you that. And in fact, if you spec it out to about the same amount of RAM and storage as the Mac Studio, the base model Mac Studio, it basically comes right up to the price of the Mac Studio. With the same number of cores. So it's like, they did plan it out. It's like they planned it. They did plan it out, but it's a good fit because there was a piece missing under the Mac Studio if you wanted a desktop, because it was way too far down to the M1 Mini.
Yeah.
And now with the M1 and the M2 and the M2 Pro, Apple's got kind of like a coherent Apple Silicon desktop store.
Had this been out last year, I might have bought this instead of a Mac Studio. I don't really need the Mac Studio on my desk. This would have been perfect.
Yeah, the interesting thing is I think that the hard drive space is it's the same chip that is doing it for the Studio, I believe. I'm not 100% sure.
Well, you can get up to 8 terabytes.
And so the 8 terabyte, what I will say,
you don't mind spending $2,000 more or $1,200 more.
I would have been tempted to do that because the drive is screaming fast. Like on my Studio.
Where's the cutoff though? You don't want the 512, right? Is it
the 2? I think is really where the price becomes like it starts to really arc after 2.
Yeah.
But I would get as much if you're doing video or you're doing anything else. Like on my Studio, I have I only put 1 terabyte in because I thought that I always have external drives for everything that I'm working on.
Right.
The problem is my external NVMe RAID. Yeah. It's got 4 NVMe's and it's half the speed.
This is almost like unified memory. The storage is so close to the CPU. It's as
really
fast as it can be. I should have mentioned that if you want to pay $300 more, you can get a 12-core CPU with 19-core GPU. But there's the big limitation, and this is artificial, but I'm sure this is why they did this. 32 gigs is the max memory. So if you need more,
but not on then you go to the laptop, because the laptop I think goes to 96. The
laptop goes to 96.
It's the difference between Pro and Max, right? The Pro chip is in between the low end and the Max, and so the Mac Mini. This is why the Mac Mini is coherent with the Mac Studio, is because the Mac Mini will take you in slots sort of A and B, the M2 and the M2 Pro. If you want to go up to C, which is and they all scale, it actually I think is more coherent than in the old Intel days where there were a whole bunch of different Intel chips, and then Apple picked and chose, and then some of them had different features. Now it's sort of like they've built this thing to go M2, M2 Pro, M2 Max, and then presumably M2 Ultra, and it just kind of scales up. So if you look at the M2 Pro and say that's not enough, Apple's answer will be then you want to move up to the Studio,
or the Studio, or if you want you can actually get a 16-inch laptop with 96 gigs of RAM.
Yeah, or the M2 Max on the Pro. Yeah.
So one of the things that we did note, maybe it was just to make me feel better, is that the M2 is not as big a jump from the M1 as the M1 was from Intel.
It's true. It is. I mean, I think about these systems, especially the laptops when we talk about them, and I still think the biggest appeal of the M2 is from people who stayed on Intel and were like, I'm going to sit out that first generation of Apple Silicon. Because the M1 to M2, I mean, the cores are faster. If you're on the base model, you get all the ProRes encoding blocks and stuff that were only on the high-end chips in M1. But basically, it's just the cores are, right? The CPU cores are faster. The GPU cores are faster. Everything's a little bit better. I don't think anybody who's got an M1 MacBook Pro should be super sad about today, right? Like I think this is an incremental.
Good. Let me underscore that because I just bought a 16-inch M1 MacBook Pro for my son a couple of months ago because I thought, well, I'd give up. And I don't want him to feel like he's got something less. I did say there'll probably be a new one at some point. I didn't think it'd be this quick. I would have waited had I known. And that's what you were saying, Andy. That's why these embargoes grind a little bit because people are making buying decisions.
That's the value of Mark Gurman's reports, right? Is that he is giving people a little bit of a heads up.
And to be fair to Apple, they do have a very liberal return policy for the first few weeks of a new product, right?
And of course, you can't expect them to say, "Hey, by all means, please don't boost our third quarter revenues." Yeah, but it's just it's the only time it kind of gets up my nose is when you see that as like the official Apple line. Oh, we want to preserve the surprise and the delight, saying, okay, look, if that's the reason, I can deal with less surprise in my life in 2023.
They want to preserve the revenue from the previous product.
Keep selling.
There's a famous anecdote in technology, the Osborne effect, where Adam Osborne, who's long gone, had a portable computer, the Osborne 1, that was very, very popular and very big seller. Mistakenly, he said there's going to be a new Osborne 2 months before it was available, killed the Osborne 1 and eventually the company. So that's the you don't want to Osborne yourself is what people will say.
Yeah, and I think it's generally prudent to, if you're shipping, not to say anything until you've been you're going to ship a week later.
Well, you can tell though, by the way, all of these things are available if you get the base model in a week, next Tuesday. And even if you don't, even if like I spec the hell out of this thing, it's still available the 31st. So my guess is the elves over Christmas were just cranking these things out as fast as they
think so.
They have a lot in stock, right? This is not going to be the one where they go, oh, we could have sold more if we'd only had more. They have made a lot of them.
That's why it was such a surprise to everybody. But the new case design was Nordic wood with dowels. So.
Those elves love Nordic wood. It's ironic because, in the same year, and this is unusual for Apple, they also announced the M3 at the end of the year. Lisa got an M2. I scooped her. I got the M3. I hope you got one of those. Boy, they're really nice. And actually, if you still have an M1 Mac, you're very happy too, I'm sure. Coming up, more of the best of 2023 as we take a trip down memory lane. 2023 was a big year for Andy Anako and I. We were subscribers to a service called Primeponic, which Apple bought like 2 or 3 years ago, and put out of business. And they said, here's your money back. Thanks very much. So we went a couple of years without really a very good classical app. Now, you may not believe this, but if you listen to classical music, it really is true. You need a dedicated app. Well, this was the year Apple made Andy and I whole. We were just talking about it last week. I was bitching and moaning that Apple...
Last week, Leo, every week.
Every week?
Every week since they killed Primeponic.
Andy
you have
and I,
been there.
We were the two Primeponic users, and we were both...
Is Apple Music Classical up yet.com owned by Leo Laporte.
To be fair, Jason, Apple was the parents who said that, well, we're not going to open our Christmas presents on December 24th. We're going to wait till December 25th. And then we couldn't open them in January. Then we couldn't open them in February. They were promising us something special and not giving it to us.
True. So we were Apple has announced right after a show last week, they are going to finally launch Apple Music Classical, a standalone app available March 28th. Although now what I do every day is I wake up and I open the app to see if I have it, because it could come earlier. I mean, you're able to download it as like a pre-thing from the App Store, but nothing has happened yet. 5 million unique tracks, thousands of exclusive albums. And everybody asks, well, why do you already have all these pieces in Apple Music, don't you? And I don't know, actually. It sounds like maybe there'll be more stuff than is in Apple Music, but the real issue is, as you said, Zach, metadata. Because and you said, I think last week, Andy, the best thing is going to be that you could say, I want to hear Bach's B minor mass, and then you can see 20 different versions of it by different orchestras, and because
sometimes with classical, sometimes it's I just want to hear the B minor mass, or why do you want to hear this recording? Is it because it's a Bach recording? Is it because it's this orchestra? Is it because it's this conductor? Is this because it's this soloist? And it becomes really, really hard to really drill down on what you like, or for the algorithm to figure out what is it that you like about this. I'm still in the Spotify hole, where the fact that I listen to so much classical and opera, it keeps giving me like, hey, suggested albums. Here's a compilation of sweet sounds of the 60s.
I get a lot of that.
music to play paddleball by.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
they decided you're my age, Andy. This is now, unfortunately, Apple in the App Store preview, and you can see you could pre-order it, doesn't have an iPad screenshot as far as I can tell. That worries a little.
It seems like it's coming out for iPhone. It's not on the Mac, and I can see it on my iPad too. So I suspect it'll run, but I think it's going to run in like the little iPhone window thing instead of full.
How hard
for
could
Apple.
this be, Apple? You had 18 months. You're almost a $3 trillion company. You have billions in the bank, and you can't get an iPad version of this.
Oh, also remember that when they bought the company to get classical, that company had an Android app, but they're saying, oh, we're going to be supporting Android real
someday.
Soon.
Yeah,
I mean, they could also have not. Like it is, at least they said they will support it, and quite frankly, they haven't said that about the iPad or the Mac. So I would take it as a win, Andy. It's better than radio silence.
I'm not complaining. No, I'm not complaining.
And
one of the things that I liked about Primeponic is they had some really excellent, believe it or not, podcasts. They had excellent shows.
Yeah.
And I don't see those in this, but this is just screenshots that Apple has put up. So who knows what Apple will end up doing.
Yeah. I mean, one of the great things about Apple Music when they launched was that they did have real human beings like curating and making recommendations and having their own shows. Just like one of the great things about the App Store is that they have editors who are not just going by metrics. They're simply saying, hey, here are 8 really great apps that take advantage of Apple Pencil. I think a lot of us have worked with people who are now working at Apple and doing those editor things, whereas they used to do them on websites. So I'm just hoping that they put the same amount of energy into this as they would any project that they actually take seriously. I hope it's not something where we've done it. We acquired it because we needed every advantage we could possibly get against Spotify. But, oh gosh, we had to take some people off this project because of other priorities at the company. That would kind of stink if it kind of died on the vine. Even the desktop version of Apple Music is, I mean, it's a great Swift project if you're at summer school learning how to program for Mac, but it's not really a great app.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we'll find out maybe before March 28th, but that's the official release date. And Zach, you didn't weigh in on this in any form or fashion.
I have a few things in mind. Yes.
Okay.
So, one, no iPad app. You can do the iPhone app on the iPad.
Yeah.
It's nicer than ever with Stage Manager, the incredible multitasking feature. You get your background. you can run it next to other apps, even though it's an iPhone app. So you could have like classical next to Instagram, next to, you name it, and it'll all work together. So maybe they're just giving up on iPad apps and this is the future. That would be bad. The other thing is
somehow I doubt that, but okay. Yeah.
A few other things. I know that a lot of the employees that were at Primeponic are on the music team or on the data team at Apple.
That's actually good insight. So they kept the team and they're still there. That's a good sign.
Right.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say like 75 or 80% of the people that were there are still there. I did a LinkedIn exploration one time and saw that. And then last thing is with Primeponic, they would pay for the song based on minute played instead of stream played, because you can have a 3-minute pop song and you pay for the play, but you have a 30-minute or 3-hour classical performance, and so you pay for the minute. That was a big part of why Primeponic existed in the first place, was to make that sustainable. I guess with it being Apple, they don't have that problem, but I am curious how that, if that changed or not with Apple, because you'd imagine, even though Apple can support classical service on its own, subsidize it with Apple Music and the iPhone, then you'd still want the artist behind the performance.
Well, I'll be watching Herbert von Karajan's Twitter account to see if he says anything about this.
See if he has a jewelry upgrade and starting to wear a crown or something. I mean, that's an excellent point, because one of the things I do like about Apple Music is that they pay creators a lot more than like YouTube pays creators garbage.
Right.
Amazon too, but it's nice to know that of the not that streaming is helping to make up for the loss of album sales, but you like to think that they're being compensated as much as possible.
Yeah. There's more to this story than meets the eye. Thank you, Zach, for filling us in on that. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, and for those who are not like super into classical music, Jesse Char, who has worked at Apple and has a cellist and had a design company, like she did a great Twitter thread that is explains it in short detail of, you know, the challenges compared to the music app, which is designed for pop music. So, you know, her example is like you open the Nutcracker and like literally you can't tell what the tracks are because the track names are so long that you can only see the beginning of it, and you can't really see like there's like when it was composed and there's also when it was recorded, and like the fundamental thing, like as Zach said, metadata, like it's ironically, it's like the App Store, right? The App Store is a pop music service because they just took it from iTunes. And when you apply a pop music sensibility to other data sets, it doesn't always map very well. And classical is just a great example where that interface doesn't work for classical music. And so that's the reason there's a separate app. And that's the reason why people like Leo and Andy and Zach are excited about this service, because I mean, I don't know. I know I know how cranky Beethoven was, and you know, I know a little bit. I've seen Amadeus. Anyway,
he loved and lost, Jason. All right.
Yes, he did. He was just a very, very grumpy guy. And I recalled yesterday that when I was taking piano lessons as a kid, I would get little plastic busts of classical composers as rewards for. So it's like, oh, you got Chopin this time. I'm like, oh, that's so great. So they're like Funko Pops, except, you know, classical music.
That's hysterical.
So anyway, there are lots of reasons why this makes sense, and it being its own thing, and that's why people like Leo and Andy and Zach are excited about it.
Yeah, there's a reason. Oh, sorry, Ludwig, sorry.
Why so angry, Beethoven?
Why so angry?
Well,
you know, well, you made a good point. Like I was getting Rock Me Amadeus every time I asked for Mozart. That's not what you want, right?
That's what I want. I mean, Falco.
What you want.
Falco is a treasure. Austria's treasure. You know, that's the first non-English song to hit #1 in the U.S. was
Rock Me Amadeus.
Rock Me Amadeus. Before La Bamba and Despacito, there came Rock Me Amadeus.
He was a wall breaker, a ceiling.
The Falco. Oh yeah,
Falco,
he was
that old Falco fella. Let's talk about the. I'm going to be grumpy today. You did not get to try it on, Micah Sargent.
I did not. The most that I got to do was walk into a room where there was this sort of center table, and there were two headsets on poles.
This reminds me a lot of when the iPhone came out. And
yes,
you couldn't really go near it,
and you just see this animation playing on the front screen.
Is this your TikTok, or is this somebody else's TikTok?
I guess it is. Yes.
Yeah. It's our TikTok.
Yeah, it's our TikTok.
Here's your video from our Slack channel. Very, very crowded. How many of them did they have there?
They had, I believe, well, I guess it's double, so it was 6 around the table.
And I wonder, you know, they're doing these. There's a close up of it. They're doing these demos for people yesterday and today. I imagine because it's stretched out so far that there are a handful of them.
There are a handful of them, but what is important to understand is that much like the first iPhone, where if you push the wrong button, everything fell apart.
Yeah, that
is what we are seeing with these headsets. These headsets.
So people who are doing the demos are saying highly guided.
Yes.
There's another part to this which I should mention, and I think this is a big problem for it. Is you have to set it up. You have to have your face shot with the device, the Vision Pro, but also your ears scanned with your iPhone. You have to have your face scanned with the iPhone.
And right now, they don't even have that process fully baked in yet. I cannot stress enough how much this is why it's coming out next year. Is that it's not there yet. Right now, they're doing it with an iPhone. You don't actually do the setup process with the headset itself. yourself. You do it with an iPhone that then pipes that information into the headset. And the Lance Ulanoff was one of the folks who was able to try it, and I think did a really good job of detailing the experience a little more than I've seen from some folks. They have a special device that people who make lenses for glasses.
Zeiss makes the lenses, but you have to get your particular prescription.
Yes, and so
they had an optometrist.
That's what it is.
Testing machine
to figure out what to pop in, and they do this all. It's almost like
assembly line.
Assembly line, yes, exactly. And so you don't see what's happening behind the scenes. Then you go in; it's there for you to put on. Another thing is that they didn't show this. You don't see this in the videos. You don't see this. I didn't see this in the photos that I was able to capture. But there is also a strap that goes over the head to help add support. It's interesting that they're not showing that. I don't know if that means that eventually they hope they won't have to have that, or what, or if it's an optional strap that's in the in the eventual box. But there's all this stuff that's kind of happening behind the scenes.
The
right
reason
now
I think that's kind of important is because one of the we happen to have one right here. Thank you, Anthony, for bringing yours in. One of the reasons I think it's important is because one of the use cases might be to have this at an Apple store to let people try it, or put it in an IKEA showroom to let people do that thing that Alex Lindsay thinks everybody wants to do, which is place furniture in their house. But if the setup is so lengthy and personalized, by the way, it even has iris recognition, so that it knows it's you when you put it on. It is a very personalized device. It's not something that you could just have in a mass market situation.
Yeah, and I think
we should say everything I'm saying is about this. We don't know what 5 years or 10 years or 20 years down the road they'll be. But I have to say, as far as I could tell, for reading a whole bunch of stuff and looking at a lot of videos, A+ in technological innovation. We'll talk about some of the features. Really, something only an Apple could do. In fact, Meta hasn't done it. HTC hasn't done it. Nobody's done this. One. Two, I think in terms of performance of delivering a product that's amazing, they've done A+, but I cannot help but point out that ergonomically this is a solid F, that people are not looking to strap screens on their faces. And so what happens when you develop something so cool? It's almost like they made the world's best, submersible submarine, and it's like, oh, this is amazing, but it's just not it's not something people are looking for. You disagree, Andy?
Well, I wouldn't say it's an F. I mean, the thing is, the
ergonomics are not good.
My overall take on this is that this is not the machine that Apple wanted to show off. This is they just got impatient and they stopped waiting for the display technology to become small enough, compact enough, and to do what they wanted to do. To make the device they wanted to make. So they decided, we're going to make something that is a very conventional looking, familiar, the device will be familiar to people who have been using VR headsets for the past 5 or 6 years. And we will simply move on from there after demonstrating that we know how to run these displays. We know how to get enough detail that you can read text pretty much at any size, no matter where you put the window in the virtual space. That lag is not going to be a problem. And that as far as comfort goes, it's going to be as comfortable as such a device can possibly be. I do
notice they never mentioned the weight. They never mentioned the fans.
But the people getting back to
Marquez Brownlee said it was very heavy.
Yeah,
and he's got a pretty strong neck.
Yeah.
One would think
most of the people that I read who got the demos, they said that the setup was actually very, very quick for what it was doing. It wasn't like very, very cumbersome. They also mentioned specifically that one of the things that Apple was admitting to was that they were still working on that interface between the device and your head. They had a limited number of sizes available to make sure that things fit correctly to people's heads, but they were working on, by ship date, having so many of these different variations.
Yeah, one of the things you'll do is have your face scanned, and they will custom mold a front piece for you. Yeah. So, and that's another reason you're not going to see these in a mass market situation.
And the other thing is regarding the fan, that most of the people I've been reading, and the one person I talked to said that you really couldn't hear the fan. So
okay. That's fine. It's good they have a fan because otherwise
I wouldn't say F. It's F compared to what but you do have it right on the money. We've been talking about this for a long time, that this is still, I mean,
in general, VR headsets.
I'm joking about this, but I mean,
he's putting on his Viewmaster
to put this, to put on this
you don't want to
really
wear that
big ski goggle thing is a really big thing. And I think it's kind of adorable that they came up with like the iView, saying maybe it'll be okay if we have a lenticular screen that will make people be able to see your eyes behind it.
Well, there's another
that's how desperate they are.
Totally dystopian and weird thing. They showed a father taping a video tape, 3D stereoscopic tape of his kid blowing out the candles. Yeah, that's great. Except all I'm seeing as a kid is creepy-eyed dad.
Everyone I spoke to did not. No one that I spoke to had a positive reaction to that idea of having to wear it while you capture the video.
I think we don't live in a world where we want to distance ourselves more from people. We go to movies look, I have a credible movie theater in my house. If I'm going to go to the movies, it's because there's other people there. So I think this is to me, from an ergonomic and a psychological point of view, this is the wrong direction. Now, we've all said, someday they're going to make these as spectacles that'll just, sit lightly on your nose and you'll have augmented reality. Show me those then. I'll give it an A+ on ergonomics. But I don't even think the technology to make that exists. So Apple is doing a lot of hand waving here for something that I think is dead on arrival. Personally, dead on arrival.
Oh, wow.
They'll sell 1 million next year.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's my prediction.
Still dead on arrival.
Okay.
And by the way, I don't think they're making a lot of money. People were creeped out about $3,500. That's probably pretty close to the bill of materials. I mean, it's probably
you can't. The problem that everybody else has now, if they disagree with you and decide that they want goggles, they want to make them. The problem is Apple has locked up so many patents along
5,000
built something built along with building something that is so self-contained. It will be hard at any price for anyone to put out any piece of device that's going to really compete as heavily with that right now. The biggest problem that HTC and Facebook had and Google had was a constant discussion about price, which Apple stopped talking about. And Apple was just like, I mean, that isn't the highest end headset that I've seen, but it's the highest publicly available one, or will be. And the ones that I saw that were nicer than this were $250,000 each. So
I'm going to point out that the Microsoft Kinect, which was the fastest selling consumer product of all time at that time, you probably don't even remember it.
Yes, I remember.
Sold 35 million units and is gone and was considered a massive failure. A lot of technology went into that thing. That sold 35 million and was considered a failure. I don't think this is going to sell. 1 million, big deal.
Well, I think the first couple of years, it'll probably be, somewhere in the sub 5 million range. 1 million is going to be the basement. I think that 5 million is probably.
Well, it could sell 35 million and still be a failure. Of course, it's a lot more expensive than the Kinect was.
It's a lot more expensive than Kinect was. And so
that's why it's not going to sell 35 million, I might add.
And I don't remember what the numbers are for the watch, but they weren't very big in the first year.
This is not the watch. This is not the watch. The watch was relatively much, a tenth the cost. And was an accessory that you could wear that had some utility right out of the box. It was a watch.
Yeah. Is the bigger question here not, does Apple need this to be the first big success in this idea of spatial computing? Can we not have a second generation that is the Vision without the Pro that then becomes the consumer model?
I think you're still probably 3 or 4 years away from a model that's less expensive than this one.
So this is the stopgap, right?
But it's not a stopgap. I don't think it was a stopgap. I think it is another step in something they were building from the beginning. So the thing is that there's no. No, it's not a stopgap. It's a step because it's not. They're not saying, "Oh, we couldn't get to what we wanted to." I think that they've been building a systematic process. This is part of that systematic process. I don't think they got impatient a couple of years ago. I think that they probably had this largely figured out 4 or 5 years ago. In that as a headset of this is what the first one's going to be. And then the next one will be much more transparent. And the next one will be much more. I mean, Apple is oftentimes working at 10 years in advance, So the thing is that I don't think that this is, if they got impatient, it was in 2017 or 2018 or 2016. It wasn't last year or 2 years ago. And so the thing is that I think that the problem is that you can't build the headset that you want without people interacting with the headset that you can make today. So while you can
I understand that.
Talk about that. And what happened is all the other headsets have been dumbed down because of price. Like even the Facebook one that's $1,500, which gave more headroom, price has been devastating to these devices because they just require so much technology to be fluid. And so Apple's making it more expensive. They're allowing themselves to figure that out.
The technology is in there that probably costs them, close to that to put 11 cameras and 7
it's
screens.
Incredible. It's an incredible
I understand that.
device.
I'm not, they had to cost that much. In fact, Harry McCracken pointed out that the Apple One, which cost $666 in its day, in 1976 dollars, would have cost $3,554 today. So it's $54 cheaper in real dollars than the
and I got
the Apple
my
One.
Apple IIe, my Apple IIe in today's prices was over $5,000.
I just say that those things were much more useful immediately. This is not, no one wants, I hate to tell you, Alex, I know you love it and there are people who love it. No one wants to put screens on their face. It's a horrible experience.
Well, not yet. I do think that this is the best that they could do right now. They had to have the first one of these.
So great.
Eventually,
they've colonized a craggy island covered in burnt guano. Congratulations. You own it.
But this would be a very, very weird choice for Meta to have done. For Apple, if they have the ability
money
to simply say exactly, I think that they have the ability to launch a product like this without any real expectations that's going to be a success in any way other than it works. This what they have to. I think that what their priority is that they have to sell the idea that this is going to be the 4K display that you're going to have off of your Mac is so good that it's going to be the equivalent of a real display for you. When you have app windows floating in front of you in front of an environment, that's going to be so easy to use as a display that you're going to be able to use it. They have to prove the idea that this is not just for training people in how to maintain an aircraft engine in the military. This is not just about gaming, that this is going to be a computing platform. So I think that their idea is that so long as they develop a first generation of hardware that can sell that idea that this is a platform for apps, not just a way to look at magic dinosaurs jumping up and down on the desk in front of you, they will consider that a win for the next generation to come.
Yeah. And I think that one of the big things is that while everybody else had to figure out how to build all those things, Apple is making a lot of the apps that already exist just simply work in there. And so being able to, you're not leaving this to use something else, which is a big hill that everybody else had to climb, is like, what do we do? And how do we get people to put it on? Well, there's just a ton of things that you can just go ahead and do in there. And so, I think a lot of us
that's, by the way, you say it that way. I'd say it's, nice lock-in, Apple. This does not work if you are not. Do you have to own an iPhone to use it? I know it's a standalone computer, but
probably. I mean, it's not really going to be aimed at
nobody minds.
Yeah,
I'll buy it. Do I need a Mac? Fine. I'll get an iPad too. Let's just buy everything. It's very good. It's a very good ecosystem play for Apple. Congratulations.
Yeah.
And the reason they could do that, Alex, is because it's basically, iPad OS. I'm sure it's running a mock kernel. It's very similar, I think, to iPad OS, I'm sure. Oh, the Vision Pro. We will probably see that thing finally. That's one of the fun things about the best ofs is we can travel back in time and then travel right back into the present. The Vision Pro should, according to Mark Gurman and all the experts, be coming out in the next couple of months. That was a Freudian slip. Next couple of months. In fact, that's what Apple says, right, in their announcement, early 2024. So we'll see. Are you going to buy one? I may be the last holdout. I'll be the poor guy on the street corner. Everybody's walking around with their Vision Pros on, and I'll just be standing here saying, where's the store? We're going to take a little break, come back with more of the best of 2023 in just a bit. Well, now, one of the things that does happen every year, of course, is an anniversary. But this was a big anniversary. Do you remember? I certainly do. 25 years ago when Steve Jobs, announced the Bondi Blue iMac. This was it's hard to remember this now, but we were doing the screensavers, Kate Patello and I. The computers were boring, ugly, kind of junky metal beige boxes. Here comes this beautiful, round, gorgeous Bondi Blue thing. It was really a stunner. And today, or this year anyway, August 15th, we celebrated the 25th anniversary of the iMac. August 15th, 1998. It was really the kind of the bow on Steve Jobs' return, wasn't it? This was the product that he came back to Apple to make in some ways.
Yeah, it was I think the pivot point in Apple's survival. Obviously, lots of steps after that. But if you think about it, Jobs was really only officially back for a very short time, officially for like less than a year when they called that event. And think about how little time there was to put that whole thing together.
Johnny Ive design, obviously.
Johnny Ive design. He had been experimenting, right? Like the beige G3 had a little tiny plastic translucent button on it. So he was trying, and there was the like all-in-one molar Mac that had some translucent plastic, but he's there. Jobs gets there. He looks at the projects that they're working on. They have this project called Columbus, which is originally going to be like a net computer. It was like a Larry Ellison, the future is diskless computers that are on a network. And they were working on that with the Columbus project. And I think Jobs came in and basically like, look at Johnny Ive, looked at the Columbus project. It was, I wrote a piece for The Verge this week about it, went up today, and I said it's like, literally, it's like that scene in The Princess Bride where Wesley is like, what are our assets? And it's like, if we only had a wheelbarrow and a Holocaust cloak. And literally, it was like, we got this diskless workstation thing. We got Johnny Ive's plastic, and Steve Jobs is like, and I always wanted to make an all-in-one. That's what the Mac was supposed to be. What can we do here? And the iMac, in very short order, was the result, and it changed everything because it was successful enough to give them cash to stay alive, to make OS X, and then open Apple stores and ship the iPod and go on to all the success that they've had.
Bondi Blue, there's a very nice, if you're interested, kind of survey of the original iMacs on The Verge today to celebrate. Came in, a lot of people remember all the colors, but it really came in that one color at first in 1998.
Right.
You know?
Original model.
Andy?
I was just going to say that the influence of this machine could not be understated for industrial design. I'm not just talking about like other PCs. You could walk into like a home goods store and, oh, look, it's a waffle maker, and it's available with like 3 different colored translucent tops. One of which is Bondi Blue, another one is Tangerine. Like you could see it pretty much everywhere, and that is the pinnacle of success for Johnny Ive or any other industrial designer. When even people who aren't competing with you, who are just simply industrial designers, are saying that's a great look, let's use it ourselves.
We were happy because Check TV just started in May of that year, and we found, because at the time Apple implied that this whole color is, you know, unique, and we really searched everywhere, and we went to the Bondi Beach in beautiful Sydney, Australia, and found this color, and we found like 20 different appliances that all had translucent Bondi Blue that predated the Apple. I mean, there was a vacuum cleaner, there was all sorts of stuff.
George Foreman grill is the classic. Yeah. Why does it need to be plastic translucent blue? I don't know, but it'll you know what did he say? It drains the fat away. Whatever George Foreman
knocks out the fat.
Knocks out the fat. That's right.
Why do you think they hired him, for God's sake?
And, yeah, that's right. He's punching it. You know, knock out that fat.
Was he? We have to remember that Apple was on fire when Steve Jobs. I mean, like, we forget that now.
Not the biggest company. Not the good way. I'm sorry.
The burn to the ground kind. Yeah,
like on fire. Yeah, like Steve Jobs had to get in, and he had to find cash. He had to keep partners. He had to do all these things and do all these horse trades and all this crazy stuff that Apple doesn't do. And then the thought that they'd be able to come out with something creative was really amazing, because usually when you're trying to fix something, you're just trying to make the things that you have work, and for them to just go, it took someone like Steve Jobs to say, well, we're going to basically throw everything else away. And we're going to, go into this one thing and make this one thing really work, was a pretty gutsy move. Like there was a lot of ways that this didn't turn out,
It was said that Apple was 150 million or maybe less away from literally going bankrupt, and that was that 150 million that Microsoft, he got Bill Gates to show up and give him.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many little moves there, and it wasn't just, I don't think it was necessarily that it was the check that Microsoft wrote so much as Bill Gates coming on and saying, oh, by the way, we are committed to supporting Microsoft Office on the Mac platform for the foreseeable future. Whereas if he basically decided to say in an offhanded comment, but well placed with PR people, yeah, you know what, we're kind of scaling it back a little bit because we have more assets to go anywhere. He could have I don't think he could have alone killed off the Mac, but that would have caused a further dive that I don't think they would have pulled up from. It was just such a beautiful play because the iMac was exactly what Apple needed at that moment. They didn't necessarily need to say, oh, by the way, you know how like all of your data is on floppy disks? Yeah, you're going to have to buy one of those because we're not giving you one of those. And you know that all your peripherals, you Mac people, are on this thing we call Apple Desktop Bus? Yeah, you're going to have to buy all new ones of those because we're doing USB. But basically the idea that they're saying here's something that's absolutely brand new in an environment in which Apple's business strategy was, let's make things more beige. Let's make things more like the way the PCs work. Let's literally start licensing the Mac operating system so people could put Macs running on boring beige commodity square angled things. This was as much a statement piece as anything else that said that, look, if you thought that we were just going to be making incremental moves, it's like we are either going to like pull up from this dive and go from aerospace into space flight, or we are going to be riding this missile, waving our cowboy hat and cheering all the way into the ground.
You know, Steve Jobs famously not a particularly sentimental guy, right? And you see it here this iMac is like a transgressive computer, like you said, Andy. ADB, Mac serial, SCSI, gone. Floppy disk, which literally every computer in the world had a floppy disk. How else would you boot in an emergency or install software? And they're like, nah, we'll just put a CD-ROM in there. No writable storage at all built into it. And most wild, they picked up this technology that while it was hanging around and the PC world was like, maybe this is the future, maybe, but it's certainly not the present. And they're like, we're just going to put that on there. And that's going to be how you connect all peripherals. And that, folks, was the universal serial bus. Your computer still has one today. You might need an adapter if it's USB-C, but like you could literally take that stupid round hockey puck mouse that came out 25 years ago. I could still plug it in on I have a Mac Studio. I could plug it in without an adapter and it would work today. And that was a huge bet because USB was not a thing until Apple made it a thing. And then they wrote it for a long time.
Yeah, I was just laughing at the word work. I mean, it was it's both really, really cool. It matched the iMac, but also in a company that's famous for bad mouses, that was probably the worst mouse of all time.
I had James Thompson, again, who worked on the Columbus project, which became the iMac. One of the things that he told me on the podcast I did about old Macs in 2020, he said that before every OS 10 meeting, as they were developing OS 10, and those were all done on iMacs, before Steve came into the room, somebody would take the mouse and rotate it so that the first time Steve engaged with it, the cursor would go in the wrong direction, so they could make the case that mouse was terrible, which it was. And I mean, I was there in 2000, right, where they had in New York Macworld Expo, where they said, "You got one under your chairs. We're sorry. This mouse is actually good now." And that was it was a long year. It was like 2 years where that bad mouse was there.
For those who aren't familiar, it was the round thing either. That's part of it.
Not only that, but and Jason's about to show us, it was just perfectly circular, so that whereas any other mouse before or since, it has an orientation that your hand just normally finds. With that one, you grab it and then your mouse is going in absolutely the wrong direction because it's not facing the way you think it is. You have to look down. That was bad.
And the RSI that generated, if you did any kind of major work on it, your hand just started. You didn't even have to get to the point where you were getting carpal tunnel. Your hand just hurt
because it was just too wide. And we were splayed out and clicking and
they used to actually sell like little docks that you could snap onto it just to give it like a lower half, so it would change it from a disc into a beetle shape. That's how big a failure this thing was.
Yeah, it was a stinker. But But the USB thing, I mean, like,
Yeah.
I think that is Apple at its best, which is you take a technology that is, you're not the first to adopt it, but like, it feels like now's a good time. And again, Jobs, one of his great abilities, I think, was just to not be sentimental, and him to say, I don't care about breaking compatibility. This thing's going to be so compelling. People will buy USB devices to work with it. There will be adapters, whatever. And USB probably would have happened, but it would have been really slow and begrudging on the PC side. And once Apple made this cool computer with USB, basically the world embraced USB, and 25 years later, it's still how we connect all our peripherals. Yeah. I know all through all these iterations. I think it's a huge thing. The fact that they got rid of SCSI and they said, no, it's all going to go through USB. And the fact that, you know, the world, there were zip drives and jazz drives and stuff. And basically what they said is, look, writable storage is not necessary for most people. And you know why? Because this thing's got built-in networking and a built-in modem. And most of your file transfers, buy a USB floppy drive if you want. But most of the file transfer stuff you're going to be doing electronically on a network or via a modem. And they were right, more or less. Although I will say, working at Macworld back then, when they made this announcement, it was hilarious to see every accessory company in the world announce not just translucent plastic, but also announce these USB devices, and none of them were ready. Like, they announced there were hundreds of brand new USB peripherals, all of which had a little asterisk next to them that was this fall, because everybody was like caught flat-footed by the idea that USB was suddenly going to be a thing. But the iMac was enough to push them all into making USB products.
So many great stories around this first iMac. I'm looking at Walter Isaacson's book about Steve Jobs, which has a chapter devoted to the iMac. He says, Johnny Ive, obviously, and his top deputy, Danny Costner, began to sketch out futuristic designs. Jobs brusquely rejected the dozen foam models they initially produced, but Ive knew how to guide him gently. Ive agreed that none of them was quite right, but he pointed out one that had promise. It was curved, playful looking, and did not seem like an unmovable slab mounted to the table. It has a sense. It's just arrived on your desktop, or it's just about to hop off and go somewhere, he told Jobs. But Jobs, who was with his binary view of the world, loved it. In fact, he took the foam prototype and began carrying it around the headquarters with him, showing it in confidence to trusted lieutenants and board members. You remember that there was no handle on the original one. He insisted on a handle, even though, let's be real, nobody was going to carry that.
It's like 40 pound
machine around by the handle.
That was kind of a sentimental thing, don't you think? Because it echoes back to the original Mac.
Yeah.
Well, and it was luggable. I mean, I think Jobs was thinking, because they all, remember, then they added the handles to the Power Macs too. I think there was the idea, like in a school or some environment like that, the teacher might pull it off the cart and drop it somewhere, and you want to be able to grab it.
Here's Johnny's explanation. Back then, people weren't comfortable with technology. If you're scared of something, then you won't touch it. I could see my mom being very scared to touch it. So I thought, if there's this handle on it, it makes a relationship possible. It's approachable. It's intuitive. It gives you permission to touch. It gives a sense of deference to you. Unfortunately, manufacturing a recessed handle costs a lot of money. And in fact, they spent the money because Johnny was convincing, as he always was. There's also the problem of the CD-ROM. Steve wanted a slot, and now I don't know if it's apocryphal, but it was part of the movie Jobs. At the introduction of the iMac, he says, "What's this?" Well, Steve, we couldn't source the slot, so it's got a drawer. And according to the movie, he almost walked away.
Story.
Is it a true story? Said, "I will not release this with a drawer," and had to be talked down, I think, by his assistant. Who essentially said, next year it'll have a drawer. It'll have a slot.
Yeah. They couldn't source the slot load drives for it, and they were already on the razor's edge. My understanding too is that, like, Motorola wanted a lot of money for the G3 that was going to kill the project because it was going to be way too expensive. And they sent a team to sweet talk Motorola into a deal that Motorola should never have agreed to, where they gave them the G3. My understanding is Greg Joswiak, who's still around and is their head of communications, was one of the people there who basically talked Motorola, and they're like, oh, but it's a consumer and we're going to ship them in volume and you can get them and they were like, no, it's going to cost this. And I believe the story is they got them to base it on the price of the model instead of a base price of the chip. And then it was a cheaper computer. And so they got to buy those chips for less. And the G3 was a big part of it because the G3 was at a moment where the G3 was ahead of Intel in terms of pure processing power. And so putting that in a consumer computer allowed them to sort of say, look, you're not giving up anything in order to use a Mac. And then the other key moment, that Jeff Goldblum commercial, that's so great. Then there's no step 3. This was the moment where the internet and online services were really taking off to the point where people wanted, instead of it being like in the early days of PCs, it was like, well, I need it for my work. I'm going to have the same computer as my work or something like that. In this era, it was like internet appliance. What is this internet? What is it? AOL? And it didn't matter if you were using a Mac because it was just email and the web or AOL. And that was huge for Apple because so many markets were just like, it was Windows or nothing. But the Mac could be a good internet appliance. And by having that modem built in and the Ethernet built in, they sort of like made it a lot easier to choose a Mac instead of a Windows PC in '98.
Here you go.
And the G3 was a lot more
3
powerful.
Easy steps to the internet. Step 1. Plug in. Step 2. Get connected.
Notice the modem jack.
There's no step 3. There's no step 3.
Only Jeff Goldblum could sell a line like
that. There's no step 3.
Step 3. There is no step 3. Thank you. Next.
We have a new iPhone. The iPhone.
We don't have it yet.
Well,
maybe
we get it on Friday.
Some people do.
I need it.
There we go.
There's always
dropped, so some people do.
There's always somebody who gets it by accident early, and then there's the reviewers. And I'm just going to say, Jason, that the review embargo usually is the Wednesday before the phone ships. So I am not going.
It dropped this morning.
Oh, so you can talk.
I don't have one, so I could talk. I can always talk. I'm free to talk.
But the reviews are starting to come in.
But the embargo reviews dropped for phone and not watch. So I guess they're going to roll the thunder, but for the phone today. So like The Verge.
The watch, there's probably not a whole lot to say. I asked Michael, our 20-year-old, who's been waiting to get a new iPhone, and I said, "You're going to get a new watch with that?" He said, because he has an Apple Watch. He said, "What's the difference?" I said, "This, you summon this." He said, "No, I don't need this."
And I think even that's not new. Like,
you get an accessibility.
I'm trying to wrap I can't find a technical answer to the question of why are they announcing this as a new feature when it is something that's been in accessibility for quite a while. Like, have they just simply promoted it from, okay, you are no longer accessibility, you are now a mainstream feature, or have they basically added enough AI elfin magic to the feature to make it more reliable and more the difference between someone who uses an accessibility feature because that's what's required to use that device, and the difference between someone who's using it because, hey, I expect this as just a regular part of the portfolio of features. Maybe it has to work a lot better and a lot tighter.
The people that Apple cares about these days have weighed in, of course, even though iJustine says it's not a phone anymore. I imagine she's going to say it's a camera, right?
I have to admit that I've been thinking about that a lot because I'd say ordered it and I looked at the feature set, a lot of the bits and pieces of it. I'm not sure, like ACES support and so on for the captures, log ACES and having the Black Magic, camera and all these other things. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to give up my 14 because I may still use my 14 as a phone and just use the 15 for a while as a camera. And not really, not think about it because it's very when you think about it as a camera, you think about it as a multi-purpose camera with, I can do 3D, I can do other things, and I may want to use it or even put it into rigs that other people are using. And then fun to have it be a phone. But the problem with the phone is all the interruptions and all the other things that may happen in that area. And so, I'm still, even though I asked for the box to send my 14 back, I'm now on the fence. This is why they don't give you the money ahead of time.
I gave my sister my iPhone 14, so I am iPhone-less for the first time ever this week, and that means my watch doesn't work either. I'm all Android, Andy. I'm like you today. I'm an Android man. But I'm surviving. It's not the end of the world. I'm using Android Auto instead of CarPlay. Justine, of course, this is part of being in the in crowd, has, of course, a video of her and Tim Cook hugging, as does Marquez Brownlee. I guess that's part of the deal. If you go to the event, did you get a picture with Tim Cook? Did he?
The line was too long, is what I want to say. I didn't see him there. I happened to get. I got through it. It was weird because the iPhone event is very strange because it's the media composition is completely different. A lot of international media, but I was able to get into the hands-on area and like do all the stuff surprisingly fast. Usually you get stuck behind a YouTuber from unknown country that's speaking a language you don't understand, and they're doing their entire stand-up and their entire demo, and you lose the will to live. And I was able to pop in there real fast, and like I was over at the Apple Watch, and they're like, "Oh, put on the watch. Let's do the new thing with the gesture." And I went over to the phones, and they're like, "Oh, here it is, and you can pick it up." And like I was surprised. After about half an hour, I was like, I think I've literally touched all the stuff and gotten all the demos. And I don't think Tim was even there yet because you wait to make an appearance. And then the mob comes and everybody takes their pictures of Tim and they get their hugs, apparently. I missed the sign for the free Tim Cook hugs.
Free hugs.
I mean, I'm a little sore at Tim because I invited him to the Cal Auburn game that weekend, and he never got back to me. He goes to me, I had an empty seat next to me. So come on, Tim. He's probably there, right? Like, but in the fancy part.
Here's Jason's article, my Easter basket of reactions to Apple's phone event. So you guys weren't sitting out in the rainbow stage. You were inside.
Oh, no. We were in the Steve Jobs Theater.
Nice. Because
that's where the demo area is you go back out of the theater to the back and exit, and there's a huge area. This is all purpose-built to do this. Purpose-built that when you emerge from the theater, which used to have live presentations, but now just plays the video. Tim did come out on stage and welcome all of us, and then he went away and played the video. But you emerge from the back of it, and they've got this giant setup with all of the products on super long tables. It's kind of like a weird alternate universe Apple store kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then there were a lot of people there. Demoing the product, which is probably why I got through it so fast, is that they really made an effort to have huge amounts of product with huge amounts of demo stations. And that's the real value in going, is that last Tuesday I got to hold an iPhone 15 and a 15 Pro, and
you got a lot of
funny.
You got a lot of press because you said how light it felt.
Exactly. Well, I was going to say it's kind of funny because I think that pickup test is actually one of the most important things, and it's experiential. So at that moment where I've been carrying around an iPhone 14 Pro for the last year, and I picked up the 15 for the first time, and I really want to remember what my reaction is because I'm never going to get an initial reaction again. And my reaction was, wait a second, like it felt so much lighter. I really believed that it was going to be, measured in grams, and technically it's lighter, but the act of picking it up and holding it up in my hand, I could absolutely tell that it was lighter, presumably because of the titanium, which led to my friend, the internet's Dr. Drang, writing an entire thing with math about how if you change the weight around the edges, you will get, he says it's probably also that it is 10% lighter, but it might be heightened by the fact that the edges aren't as heavy as they used to be.
It's the rotational inertia, and by the way, he shows the math.
I don't even know how to generate those math equations in HTML.
I know. I'm very impressed.
If you read Dr. Drang's blog, you'll find that he's been experimenting with different techniques in terms of generating the equations. I think he's going to go with MathML now. But anyway, I thought that was really informative, where he said, look, part of the effect here, at least, is that they've taken the heavy thing that's around the edges, which is, when you're picking up a phone, there's like some inertia, and the amount around the edges is going to maybe create more of an effect in your hand than if it was uniform throughout. And the fact is, the edges is where all that stainless steel was. That's now titanium, which is much lighter. And so either way, though, the bottom line is I picked it up and I went, whoa, it is lighter. And I did not expect to feel that way. And I felt that was useful. And yes, then there was a whole dialogue about the physics of it that involved a lot of math. I was told there would be no math.
The actual weight, the mass of the phone is 9 to 10% less in grams.
10% less.
But Dr. Drang, using math, points out that it's called the moment of inertia. And it makes sense. When you handle a phone, you don't just put it in your palm of your hand and weigh it. You're rotating it around, and it's the weight on the edges. So he says because of this reduced weight on the edges, the moment of inertia, the rotational inertia is 14 or 15%, which would be much more noticeable than 9 or 10.
Because you're moving the edges more than you're moving the center.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
An easy way to think about it is it's like a lever. If you have a lever, the longer that lever is, that weight is going to put more pressure on it, and that's all you're doing. It's
really this was a good piece. I thought that's going deep. I hope Dr. Drang got a Tim hug.
He's so great. I've met the internet's mysterious snowman, Dr. Drang. He's a now retired mechanical engineer who specialized in failures, actually. Like, a light standard falls down or a bridge is collapsing or something, and they bring in Dr. Drang to analyze the failures and do all. And he probably also doesn't just do failures, but anyway, and then Apple stuff is his hobby, and so he has extra skills that most of the pundits, myself included, do not have. I mean, I took college calculus. Okay, I understand a little bit of math, but I see his equations, I'm like, forget it. Right.
That's why specialists are so valuable. It's like there is someone who knows exactly, like he also knows exactly what kind of titanium this is, what the welding process to aluminum must be like, that whether they did anything innovative in the construction process or not, and how it actually becomes completely relevant. And one of the unique things about Apple is that with a lot of other companies, you would think that would be maybe a happy accident. They decided to switch to titanium just to make it lighter, and then reviewers are actually saying it feels even lighter than it is. Hey, bonus. Whereas you kind of feel as though as long as they're not making a mouse, Apple really figures out how does this feel in the user's hand. How can we make this edge a little bit more defined to make it nestle inside the crooks of your fingers a little bit better, or do we want a rounded edge there? And that seems as though that certainly comes through.
Have you seen the ad? The ad is so over the top, but it's so much fun. Their titanium iPhone ad. Have you seen the?
Oh, there's one where it's coming from space.
Yes, I watched football this weekend, Alex. I saw it 90 times.
And every time there was one point. So YouTube TV now has this new feature where you can watch 4 games at a time and just move the audio around. If you have the NFL ticket, you can just move the audio to whatever game you're wanting. When it's not Monday Night Football and the Steelers are playing, I'm just watching a bunch of games.
We watched a bunch of Steelers games. I got to tell you, I've already seen the Steelers play twice now.
But there was one point where on all the games this ad was playing, it was just in different levels of sync.
Oh, that's
the best shot right there. That shot right there, going through Saturn's rings, was just.
Let's go back.
It's just like,
so. This is the theory is the premise is this is where titanium comes from. I don't know if this is accurate, but beautiful. Titanium comes from space as a meteor. And then
it all comes from space.
The other part that's really good. The other part that's really good is when it goes through the subsurface scattering going through the clouds.
It's really well done.
It's real. This is like when you have all the money to do something just totally.
Well, it also is when you have a brand, because the first 3/4 of this ad doesn't mention Apple at all. You don't know what you're watching. It looks like a sci-fi movie, right?
That's right. Watch it go into the clouds. Watch it go into the clouds.
But you also know
this, like, turn it off right there. It was right there.
Can I say there's somewhere in some like edit suite in Cupertino, there is a version of this where like the when they start talking, it's an entirely different message. It's like, what if a meteor causes an extinction level event on the planet? You'll be happy that you had an iPhone with emergency services to save your people from
as long as the satellites survive. You like the one where it's going into the clouds?
When it goes into the clouds, it's just like this. Well, you hear it like as it goes through. It just gives it.
Yeah, we're not playing the sound because Apple's very picky, and even though we're showing an ad, they will pull us down, and I don't want to.
They didn't do the classic because it's a little bit of an old trope, but the classic powers of 10 shot. Because usually when we did shots like that, I used to do I did a couple commercials with shots like that, and you have to build this shot where you see the whole Earth coming up, and you go through the clouds, and now you're coming in close up, and then we finish it with a jib shot or now a drone, and
right. You zoom in. It's the zoom. I love that. By the way, the internet tells me that titanium is the 9th most abundant element on Earth. It's almost always present in igneous rocks and the sediments derived from them. It occurs in the minerals ilmenite.
The ad was amazing.
I think you'll find that the Earth itself was formed from a protoplanetary disk in space, and therefore all titanium, like every other element, comes from space.
It does, but it's there when the Earth forms. It doesn't come in later.
Some of it also comes in later.
Oh,
perhaps Apple is sourcing meteorite-only material for its titanium.
As you all know, the very first villain that was able to actually fight Iron Man toe-to-toe was Titanium Man, who had an armor made out of titanium. Speaks for itself. Stan the Man. Apple not all that innovative. Stan the Man, he had that. He stole that from artists in 1968.
I have to say, speaking of internet nerds, to TechCrunch's Hajj John Kemps, who did the math, he said if you had bought Apple stock instead of iPhones every year since 2007, you would now be $147,000 richer.
That's great, but you would have no phone.
But you'd have no phone
to do with this information.
Who are you going to text saying, look how rich I am?
And if I spent all that money on all of the winning Powerball tickets since 2005,
you'd have nothing.
I would be able to buy and sell Elon Musk.
147,000. I mean, it's not, you might say, oh, it's millions, but no, it's just 147.
Not a lot. No. The iPhone, the big gains, you need to go back in time. First, so invest that money in a time machine and then go back and buy Apple stock earlier.
Then
12 7/8. That number is imprinted on my mind because that is the stock price when I decided that I can't invest in Apple no matter what. It would be immoral, unethical, and probably illegal.
Yep.
Yeah.
I figured out how many shares I could buy, but I said no.
If I have Apple stock, it is in a mutual fund that I am not managing in any way.
It's in a lockbox.
Yeah. All of my money is, and I think I'm glad I did this, is in Vanguard. And I'll tell you this, young people, Vanguard target retirement funds, where you say, well, I'm going to retire in 2025 or 2030, and then you just don't look at it. And I imagine there's some Apple stock in there, but I don't know. I'm not attempting to improve my retirement by promoting Apple products.
Right. And so if you're young, it's got more risk, and as you get older, there's less and less risk in them.
Forget, I know so many people who pay financial advisors, and I always say, if they were so good, why are they working for a living? Just put it in low cost.
I just love helping people.
That's it. Sure, I'm rich now, but I still work because I love you. Put it in low load. Vanguard's very good. Funds, that Tiger retirement funds, exactly. They rebalance it every quarter. You don't have to think about it. And then magic, as long as the economy doesn't collapse or we get hit by a giant titanium meteorite, you'll have something at the end of your life.
It's okay. It's very light. It won't hurt too much.
Well, they do it every year, new iPhones every year. But I have to say the iPhone 15 Pro Max and 15 Pro with titanium, as they say in the ads, have been pretty sweet phones. Turned out pretty nicely. We're going to take a break. Coming back, we did the M2. What comes next? Well, watch. Yep, it's now time. I cannot think of another time that Apple has done a big processor upgrade twice in 1 year. Early in the year, the M2 MacBook Pros came out. We were a little bit surprised, frankly, with the MacBook Pro M3 Pro and Max all coming out late this year. And here was our reaction. I thought really, everything we had heard, the rumors were all true, by the way, except for the things like there's going to be an iPad mini. There were MacBooks and there was an iMac and there's an M3. We're going to get to all the deets on that. But there were two, I thought, surprises that nobody knew about. One, black or space black. Now, Jason, you saw it. How did you see it?
I went to New York and got a briefing yesterday morning with Apple.
Holy cow!
Got to get my hands on them, and I got to try to make fingerprints on the space black and all of that, and yeah. So I'm here
just before.
I'm ready to report back. I got to use this stuff, and there was 10 hours when I knew about it, and nobody else did. But
wow.
That time is over now.
So you were in between the last week and this week. You were in New York. Wow, that's awesome.
Like yesterday, I was in New York.
Okay.
And now I'm back. Boy, my arm's tired. Yeah, it's gray. It's dark gray. I saw a lot of people last night. They were really excited about the fact that they did a laptop in black. It's like, oh man, can you imagine? It's like, yeah, it's not what you're thinking of. You may like it. I mean, the darker gray, the better, but it is still a metallic gray. It's not as dark as the Midnight MacBook Air. So just don't get too excited.
Wait a minute, it's not as dark as the Midnight Air?
No, not even close.
So the Air is the darker of the two?
By far.
Well, yes. I thought initially that this is a very smart move for Apple because you can only get it if you get a M3 Pro or Max. So it's kind of like a status symbol, right? Well, you must have a nice MacBook because you've got it in black. But if it's not as black as the Midnight Blue.
I want Apple to come out with and talk about a revolutionary process to embed Vanta Black into.
I'm thinking Vanta Black. Why isn't it Vanta Black? Why isn't it blacker than black? There's no blacker. Why not?
I think if they do that, they should at least be good sports and turn off that feature where if something is reported as lost, it becomes useless again. Because that a Vanta Black MacBook is designed to be left behind and lost. It should be like an Easter egg hunt for people who say, you know what? Before I leave this Starbucks, I'm just going to be looking at the back of every seat just to see if somebody forgot a $3,000 notebook.
Let me quote Jason Snell from sixcolors.com.
Ooh.
I got my greasy monkey paws on a space black laptop and can report that Apple's as good as its word in the sense it seems generally more resistant to fingerprints and other smudges. They said they have a special anodization process on the black.
Yes.
But I don't want to exaggerate this feature. You can still see fingerprints. They're just not as prominent.
Exactly. Yeah. Joanna Stern from the Wall Street Journal and I both were together. We were putting our hands on that thing and trying to get it fingerprinty, and
that's pretty funny.
Apple is not making a claim that they have created a fingerprint-free Surface. They're not doing that. I think that people can run away with this, just like with the black, where in that case they're saying it's black and it's not black. It's just space gray.
Oh, but I'm so disappointed.
But the fingerprint thing, it is better. Like I have a Midnight MacBook Air. The fingerprint thing, they absolutely have made this new. They did something chemically in the anodization seal that repels liquid, including oil, from your fingerprints.
Nice.
So it's less.
Still fingerprints.
It's not gone. Right. It's a little like how they do the thing where it's like, hey, we improved the glare resistance on our screens. Like there's still glare. There's just less of it. This is like the fingerprint oil repulsion chemistry is better than it's been, but make no mistake, you can leave fingerprints on it and you will. They'll just be less prominent than they were before, which is great.
It's fingerprint resistant, not proof.
Yes, exactly. More fingerprint resistant than in the past. Yeah. And so that's nice. But again, and I don't want to shame anybody. If you like a dark gray laptop, go to town. This is a darker gray laptop than the last dark gray laptop. I just want to be clear that when Apple says space black, you may be thinking of, the blackness of space.
Yeah.
I reassure you now, it's just dark gray. Okay. It's not, it's just dark gray, metallic, dark gray. That's it.
I gotta wonder what the limitation is. Like we've all been watching like manufacturers long enough to know that white is not easy. Black is not easy. Whatever you think is easy to do in the trade dress of a device, it's not easy. I wonder if that is they made a conscious decision that they do not want this to be like the cover of a Spinal Tap album. How much blacker could this be? The answer is none. Or if they that was as black as they could possibly make it consistently, so to make sure that the first one is as the same color as the 100,000th one. Or if they decide they looked at it in that sort of, again, blacker than black trade dress and said, let's take it back a couple of shades because you can't see the contours of the machine very well, and we're very proud of the look of this device.
So this is not the first black MacBook but it's the first in quite some time.
Again,
it's not black.
It's not black. It's just, I just want to be clear. There was a black MacBook back in the day. The Midnight MacBook Air is pretty close to black, but this thing is not. Yeah, Andy's got one, but this is not that. This is a dark gray. It's a dark metallic gray.
What is that, Andy? Is that the actual? That's the painted black
MacBook.
one.
Poly.
No. That's like the vintage. This was.
Yeah, they painted it black. Yeah. I remember I paid $200 extra for that.
Yeah, it's good. I love that one. But matte black, no less.
That's actually black. This is not.
And it's plastic.
And it's plastic.
I think it has something to do with the anodization process that Apple likes to use, that they're using anodized aluminum. They're very comfortable with it. They're very good at it. I think they feel actually that part of their trade dress is metallic, right? Metallic aluminum laptop is what a MacBook is. And so I think they're not going to go to a different material. And I think maybe below a certain, I don't know whether there's a physical limitation or whether they're just not happy with the results or whether they feel it doesn't feel metallic enough. But like clearly there's, they'll get a little darker. I mean, we are talking about,
you could get a D brand skin that's black.
Sure, exactly. But for
black.
like Apple's stock, what they want, they've gone a little bit darker and they've called it black. And again, I don't think this is a scandal or anything. I just want to be clear. People are going to be disappointed if they think it's black and they order it and they get it, because what they're going to get is a dark metallic gray. It's darker than space gray. We held a space gray laptop up to the space black laptop, and I mean, it's darker. Here's what I'll say about space black. In a well-lit room without context, if there's a laptop sitting on a table, if it's silver or space gray, I think you maybe can't tell the difference. You have to see them next to each other. Otherwise, they're pretty close. Even though space gray is darker, you would not mistake space black for those other laptops. It is that much darker, but it's just not black. It's so buyer beware.
It's
if
hysterical,
you're
though,
full
that
on Darth Vader, you're not going to get it.
You have to get a Pro or a Max to get the black. Otherwise,
well, that's the story of the day, right? Is that they got rid of the 13-inch MacBook Pro and replaced it with a $1,599 low-end 14-inch MacBook Pro, which is very exciting and I think a great move. But to get it to $1,599, it doesn't do a lot of stuff.
Well, wait,
right?
It has 8 gigs of RAM to get it to.
It has 8 gigs of RAM.
8 gigs of RAM is like, that's...
Yeah, right. It's missing a USB port on the one side because it's using the M3 processor, which has fewer lanes. It doesn't support 2 external displays. It is, but I would argue it has the best feature of being a 14-inch MacBook Pro, which is the screen. That ProMotion bright screen is gorgeous. And what it does is, although it's a lesser MacBook Pro, what it's not is that 13-inch MacBook Pro that was from 7 years ago and had a touch bar and was completely out of place in the lineup. So now it's a compromised, decontented $1,599 MacBook Pro, but it is a true 14-inch beautiful screen MacBook Pro, even though it's got those limitations and does not come in space black.
It is the end of the line for the touch bar. I was so surprised to see from a number of sources a lament, an ode to the touch bar, like, oh, we really liked it. We didn't admit it, but we really liked it.
No,
we didn't.
We did not like it at all.
Yeah.
One guy said, if you're a touch typist, you kept hitting it by accident, but I learned not to. And for people who weren't touch typists, it was great. Well, it's like, come on, really?
It was a fine idea, but I mean, if it became if it became a way for third-party developers to say, by the way, we feel as though as a human interface thing, the idea of putting bespoke function keys that are bespoke for each app directly over the keyboard, which is the one fixed part of the interface, we think that's a flexible thing to do. But from the moment that I started typing on that first demo unit and it started suggesting auto-correction, like I type TH and then now the taskbar says, oh, do you want to type therefore? Like, I wanted to ask the engineers that I know are very, very smart, and I know that there's a lot of discussion. Did you really think I'm going to take my hands off a physical keyboard to navigate towards this tiny little, there was never a good reason for this thing to exist. It's one of the hallmarks of what I think is probably the worst Mac that Apple ever made.
Yeah, it is part of a bad era of Apple stuff.
Butterfly keyboard and touch bar.
The most telling thing about it, I think, is like I get the impulse was let's use our multi-touch savvy to build a Mac product that uses multi-touch, but they put it on the keyboard plane where you're really not looking with your eyes ideally. And then the truest sign of Apple's organizational dysfunction is when they ship the touch bar, the software for the touch bar essentially was never updated. Yeah. The next Mac OS version came out, no changes. They never changed it. So it feels, and when I say dysfunctional, I mean somebody in the hardware group thought this was a good idea. And it's clear that the people who wrote Mac software in Mac OS itself did not think it was a good idea and invested no effort in ever making it anything other than what it was at launch. And that is broken, right? Like, why did you make this thing if you were never going to try to improve it? And the answer is, I guess that the people who made it had a complete disconnect. It speaks so much about how broken the Mac was in the late 2010s. It's a perfect example.
The fact that they didn't do enough testing to make people realize that even in the first generation of these Macs, the escape key was also part of the touch bar. They'd done away with a mechanical escape key, not knowing how many people actually rely on that for so many of their tasks, that to make that a soft key just makes every single operation that much more painful. I mean, if we ever got together to do like a special report, I think that we should do like just a show just on that first generation of that new MacBook, because every single decision, it's the George Costanza MacBook. Every choice they made was wrong. Like, including, hey, here's the Pro MacBook for our Pro users. We decided to remove the SD card slot. Well, why did you do that? One word: courage. Yeah. No. I don't think that was it. But I remember I remember them saying that. Well, we feel that the pros aren't using SD memory cards anymore. They're using like Wi-Fi to connect. Like, are you high?
Yeah. Well, it's actually the same thing as saying, oh, well, nobody needs a physical escape key, as if they weren't aware. Like, clearly there was a talk about your dysfunction and disconnect. They were unaware of like how people used their Macs, apparently, how pros use their Macs to make these things. They were justifying weird decisions. It was such a broken time. So, and again, I think, could the touch bar have been made better and more useful? I think it was never going to be a great thing, but they could have tried. Like, they never even let third parties tie into it, right? They never did anything, and that is the most broken thing of all, is that they shipped this thing and then they immediately essentially abandoned it. I don't get it.
And
terrible.
The real issue was the amount of mistypes that you had with it was so frustrating that, and I don't know, that was the thing to fix, because I probably would have grown to like certain things on the touch bar, but all I was up against all the time was constantly accidentally hitting something, and it was just like, no, that's not what I wanted. Oh, why did that just happen? There was a lot of like, you're not even conscious to it, and your computer would just do something crazy, and you're just like, I don't understand what just happened. And then I realized that all the things I didn't understand were just the touch bar, and then you just grow to hate it. And that was I think that was one of the issues.
So moving on to the present.
There's a lot of pent up hate about that.
We're just really angry.
R.I.P.
We're really angry.
These are people in pain.
Our era, the long national nightmare is over, everybody.
It is interesting, though, that all the hollering that Apple should do a touch screen MacBook seems to have disappeared.
It's around.
Is it? I mean, I have touch screen laptops using Windows and Linux, and honestly, I hardly ever. I don't think I care, and
I have a bad habit. If I spend too much time on my iPad,
then you touch
have a tendency to touch the screen. Like, I'm sitting there typing, and then I touch it, and I go, oh, I can't do that.
Andy, you will be happy, though, I think, to hear that Apple is bringing RCS messaging to the iPhone next year. The green bubble. I don't know what color the bubble.
Did we do it? Did we do it? We talked about it last week.
Mission accomplished.
Did we do it?
Yeah. I really have no idea like what fun. It's not as though like they didn't have like lots and lots of different opportunities over the past year to at least say we're looking into RCS. We think it's an interesting way to improve the iPhone experience, the messaging experience for iPhone users, and therefore, of course, we're going to be interested in it. The fact that they were, like we talked about so much last week and previously, that they were like, no, buy your grandmother's on welfare, should buy an iPhone instead. What do you think we are? But yeah, it's weird. Well,
would you, Andy, explain before we go too much down this road what RCS is and why this is significant?
RCS is really different from iMessage. It's not as good as iMessage at a lot of things, particularly
it stands for Rich Communications System.
Right.
So basically, just to get a little history, there was SMS, which was a weird technology of messaging that wasn't based on data. It was actually going over the voice channels. Right. That's why it was so limited.
Created during the George Bush senior administration.
Yes, exactly. And the fatal error that the phone companies in the United States did is they charged a lot for SMS capability. They did the same thing in Europe. They charged even more. And so as a result, data-based messaging platforms like WhatsApp emerged and became dominant. Meanwhile, Apple did their own version, Messages, which did both because it was on a phone, did both SMS and a data-based messaging system, preferring the data-based messaging system, but falling back to the SMS. That was the green bubble, right? It was okay. We used SMS to call you on your Android phone, Andy, because you don't support our fine protocol. So you got a green bubble, and that was your life and your lot in life. And sorry, and there were some missing features. Chiefly, you couldn't create a group with both blue and green bubbles.
Yeah, it's basically what the bottom line is that the RCS messaging is something that the industry coalition that created the previous messaging standards and all the carriers in Europe and elsewhere and Google got together and said, let's fix this. Let's start making a much better messaging platform, because they were also seeing that third-party messaging platforms were a much better experience. This was the difference being that this was RCS was still a carrier-based standard. So yes, you do have to have your messaging app support RCS, but this is not something where it goes through the RCS corporations or Google corporation servers or WhatsApp servers or Facebook servers or Apple servers to process everything. It can go through any service that supports RCS that's created by the carriers. Now, the thing that has caused a lot of people to misidentify this as, the reason why Google wants this is because it's Google's new private proprietary messaging service. No, it isn't. They were very, very big in getting this going because they had to be on board to develop this, because they basically make the messaging app for every phone that is not an iPhone. The twist that bears mentioning, however, is that although every individual carrier across the planet can create their own RCS messaging system, because again, it's a carrier-based service, it's more likely that they're going to basically put that contract in Google's hands, because Google bought a company that does RCS services. So it's most likely going to be trafficked by Google to begin with. However, I don't think that really counts as much as RCS.
Andy? I thought that the carriers were going to do the RCS.
They can. They absolutely can. They're free to do so. But in 2016 was the big pivoting point for RCS, where they decided, look, if we're going to make a go of this, if we're going to make this an adopted standard, if we have any chance of keeping carrier-based services relevant, we're going to have to make our service that's going to be compatible, that's going to be competitive with these other things. And
so, for instance, AT&T calls it advanced messaging. But they do support it, right? So, but you're saying that in most cases, Android phones will use Google's RCS server, not the carrier's RCS server.
It's still RCS. It's still plain RCS. However, Google owns the company that handles a lot of this traffic, because again, all you have to do is write a check.
So even if AT&T is doing it, it's going through a Google server.
So long, or I don't know specifically about AT&T. So long as it's RCS, it'll be intercompatible. That is the big of all the positives and minuses. And there's been a lot of discussions about the difference between something like WhatsApp and iMessage, which is true end-to-end encryption, bulletproof, real stuff. This is weaker encryption. There are people in the middle, for instance, but it's still better encryption.
Also, feature-wise, it's more like WhatsApp or Apple Messages.
Yeah, you get. Oh, let's go through the list. You get your photos will not be downgraded when you send it to somebody who's using Android. Next year when RCS is supported in the iPhone, you can send videos, you can send files, you can do voice chats through the messaging app that will, and all the media traffic, all the messaging traffic can go through Wi-Fi instead of the phone network if that's better for you. Things like groups of 100, read receive sheets, the ability to see when people are typing, a lot of the basic stuff that people expect when they see these basic services. And then the big selling point, I think, about all of this is that all you need to know is the phone number of the person you want to send this message to. That there's it's always part of the discussion that, oh, well, gee, WhatsApp is, no one uses like carrier messaging anyway, so it's irrelevant. Yeah, but how do you, a person who walks out of a store with a phone, do they know do they know what WhatsApp is? Do they know where to find it? Do they know how to install it? Do they know how to use it? Do they have everybody in their contact database who uses WhatsApp? Do they know how to inform them that, hey, you need to download WhatsApp? Whereas, though, again, in many ways, particularly security-wise, RCS is not as good as iMessage. The selling point is that all I need to know is I just need to know Alex's phone number. If after a long love affair over basic SMS or RCS messaging, we want to upgrade our relationship to iMessage or WhatsApp, we can do that. But I know that I can send Alex a text message, and through one of these services, particularly RCS, they will definitely get it. And when I take a picture, when I take a full 12 megapixel photo that I'm very, very happy with, he will get it in the full 12 megapixels. So this is why I've always said that I don't know why Apple is adamant about doing absolutely nothing, because SMS is almost literally nothing. There is no security. It is easy to snoop for. All the pictures are going to be immensely downgraded. The green bubble effect of social stigma among social groups where, oh, there's a green bubble inside the chat, that's a real thing, A, because kids are mean and horrible, but also because it degrades an all iMessage chat group suddenly has to dumb down to the standards of SMS, which costs everybody a lot of big stuff. Apple hasn't said very much. I don't think there's even an official announcement so much as they've confirmed to 9 to 5 Mac and other outlets what they're doing. But they
by the way, said it will be green bubbles.
It will be green bubbles. I think that's okay. I would have, because I think it's important to say, hey, by the way, you were using a less secure transport
to
than
make
iMessage.
It distinct from iMessage's platform.
Yeah. So they've already said that, hey, we're going to be working with the GSMR committee to do things like increase the security level that's possible through RCS, which is again something I think they could and should have been doing all along. So I'm very glad. I don't know why they decided. Maybe they just looked at every piece of legislation that's coming through the EU, the problems of trying to deal with the Digital Markets Act, and said that it is now more difficult to be petulant than it is to simply comply. And I'm actually optimistic that they're not going to be a very whiny sort of compliance. The bare minimum they can possibly do to basically say that iMessage is interoperable. I think that at this point, all the people inside of Apple who have been fighting to adopt RCS are going to get their way and say, we're not going to do it in a halfway way. We're going to do this the best way it can possibly be implemented, including making RCS better for everybody.
Yeah, their statement that they're going to work with the GSMA, I thought, was the point where they're showing we're not going to drag our feet. We're going to do this, and we're going to work with them on it. Although it is funny, after Google has put so much effort into all of this, it did have a feeling like there's some meme out there that covers this. I'm sure it's the boyfriend meme. I'm not sure, but it's the idea of like, hey, Apple's coming over here. They're coming over here. We did it, everybody. We did it. Oh, they're talking to the GSMA. And then there's a Google statement that's sort of like, yay, they're here. We're looking forward to working closely with them. And Apple is not even looking at Google, right? They're just looking at the GSMA.
That Google was hoping that they would use the Google Jibe servers and not do an open.
I think Google was using this as branding for Google and Android and trying to shame Apple.
It's not, though.
And now Apple is like not even talking about Google. They're just talking about adopting a standard. And that's a very cold move. That is a very Apple move. But I think in the end, they're not going to drag their feet. This isn't going to be kind of like a halfway move. I think that they're going to really legitimately support it. And I think that they probably do have the attitude, like, if we're going to do this, we should probably work with the standards body to make the security better, because we're not really thrilled with the security level on it. But I think that they're going to.
It beats SMS security.
SMS is so bad and old.
Yeah.
And that was my point last week. Was just,
so it's an improvement.
This is not replacing iMessage, but I do think it's because of the EU, right? I think in the end, that's why they're doing it, is they want to be able to say, look, iMessage is for our users. Everybody else gets, and they're looking like, not that. This RCS thing that's okay, right? Instead of it being like a thing from the Bush administration.
So to be clear, as long as you're messaging somebody with an iPhone, you're going to continue to use iMessages and the iMessage protocol and have all the encryption.
In messages.
You won't notice anything.
Instead of falling back to SMS when you talk to Andy on his Android device, it will now fall back to RCS. Still be a green bubble, but it'll be somewhat more secure, somewhat more feature rich. Now, by the way, I want to point out
with read receipts and locations and all sorts of stuff that you can't get with SMS.
Pathetic, really, and data.
And it'll fall back to SMS if it absolutely has to. But
there's always that.
And it's when they say later next year, it's before December 31st. So we have
mystery.
To keep that on track. And I think that obviously we're probably going to see more features in iMessage that would not be compatible with RCS. You'll get all the things that RCS has, but I would be surprised if Apple doesn't add a bunch of little tchotchkes that the kids like, because as we've talked about before, the kids are really important. And I'm not clear that. I think that the trajectory, it'll be really interesting to see how the trajectory goes in many parts in Europe and many other places where someone was talking to someone or someone was tweeting me or X posting or whatever they call it now, from Australia. And they said almost everybody's on Android in Australia, for kids that are in school. Right. So it really depends on the part of the world. But in the U.S., where there is some revenue, we're seeing, we've talked about it before, the stat of 87%. And I know that with my kids, they just look at the blue bubble. Like, I don't think they even know what the feature set is. That means that's the difference between blue and green. They just look at the color, and so the color is a bunch of decisions that they've made about what that color means. And that might take a little longer to get out of. Yeah.
We should point out the iPhone is about 50-50 in the U.S. It's just among young people that it's 87%.
But that's obviously what everyone's concerned about. You're absolutely right. It's 50-50. Yeah. It's just that when 87% of everyone under 18 is using a one thing, the chances of them getting off that platform becomes less and less as they get older.
So Jason, you thought
I was kind of hoping that. I was kind of hoping that Apple would, like I said, I think that's a good idea to keep it as a green bubble, again, to communicate that iMessage is a much more stronger security than RCS. We just want to let you know that you're not using iMessage on this transport. I think it's important. I wish that there were a parental control setting, however, that if the parent has set up, oh, by the way, this iPhone belongs to someone who's between 12 and 18, you can have a setting that says, oh, by the way, all iMessage bubbles are going to be orange, so that you can basically say, I don't want my kids to know that they're talking to somebody who uses an Android, because I don't want them to either bully people or to be bullied. I don't think that, as long as the parents have access to knowing the nature of the communications, I think there's no problem in getting the kids to say, you know what, we're not going to let you. It's orange. Congratulations. It's your friend Josh. You don't need to care what kind of phone they have, because a lot of it is class shaming. Because look, the poor person who can't afford a phone. Like this is a Pixel 6 Pro with a terabyte of storage. It costs more than your phone, idiot.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool idea of just saying parental advice to say, I don't want my kids differentiating between platforms and being bullies. I think that's cool. I think that's a cool idea. And to Alex's point, I was just going to add on, of course, Apple is going to keep adding things to iMessage, because Apple given a choice, is going to build things itself that it thinks are going to be cool and new. And the last thing they're going to do is wait around and propose them to a standards body and tap their feet and wait for a year and then have it be kind of like, that's just not how Apple works.
Lightning all over again.
Yeah. If they have something cool that they think they want to do, they'll just do it. And then maybe eventually the standard will catch up with them. I think that's just their attitude. I don't care if
the standard happens or not. Like, they'll just be like, this is what you get when you have iMac. I mean, obviously we talked about this earlier, the difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit. They have a vested interest in making their product cooler than the cross-platform version of it. And they're going to keep on doing that. I mean, and I think if anything, they'll accelerate that effort as opposed to decelerating it. You'll see more features in mostly ones that we probably don't need as an adult, at least. Like all the gestures, mine doesn't do that because I'm not, but that's making everybody crazy. I don't know. Everybody I know is just like, how do I turn, we get this question all the time. Like, how do I turn these things off? Because it's all the fireworks and the balloons and everything else that has not been, at least
we have a whole hands-on Macintosh and a whole iOS today about how to turn that off. That's that's a Sonoma feature.
Like, it is.
Wow, it's been fun going back in time. It's been a really good year for Apple. They're now a $3 trillion company. Less of a good year for TWiT. I enjoyed what we did this year, but I'm sad to say, in general, podcasting has had a really rough year. Advertisers have turned to other media, particularly, YouTube, influencers, places where they can spy on you and advertise very directly to you. And we're not so good at that, I have to say. We haven't been really willing to do that. And as a result, ad revenue is down dramatically. We know it's going to be down even more next year. That's why we started the club. And I hope that those of you in the club enjoy it. I know that you do. But I would like to also invite those of you who are not yet in the club to join. Not only because of the benefits, but because it makes a big difference to our bottom line. After doing the books, Lisa came to me and said, if we don't double the club this year, we may not have a 2025. And I want to keep doing this. I think Apple is on a roll. There's all sorts of exciting stuff happening. AI, VR, AR, Vision Pro. And we'd like to cover that. So if I could, may I ask you very humbly to join Club TWiT, $7 a month. Very affordable, I think, People said we should charge more, and you can, by the way, pay more if you want to. But $7 seems fair. Ad-free versions of all of our shows, including MacBreak Weekly. Shows we don't put out in public, like Hands on Mac with Micah Sargent. You also get access to other bonus content that isn't available anywhere else. And one of my favorite parts of Club TWiT, the Club TWiT Discord, a great place to talk and meet other geeks and discuss stuff. There's that event we did in the club with the escape box. Join the club. It's a great place to be. There are great benefits. Most importantly, you're helping us do the thing we love to do the most. And I hope you value the most, which is continue with our great shows. $7 a month. Go to twit.tv/clubtwit. And thank you. I really appreciate it. We thank our club members every show because really they make it possible for us to do what we do. We will be back next year, not so long, in a week, January 2nd, with Andy Anako, Jason Snell, Alex Lindsay, and I will be here as well, and we hope you will too. We really enjoy doing MacBreak Weekly, and I thank you so much for listening and watching all year long. I hope you're having a great holiday season, and here's to a peaceful, happy, successful 2024. We'll see you next year. Bye-bye. I think there's water. There's water in that one.